Hey everyone, welcome to our next maple syrup. Hello to all the people in the class today, all the wonderful people. I, as always, am going to go get my coffee and then come back up, and we'll get right to it. Our topic today, technically, if you are following on the syllabus, is the cholera outbreak of 1852 through 1860. But I'm actually going to talk about cholera in general. And as always, I've been saying this ad nauseum. I probably do not have to continue to repeat this. However, I will. We're just going to do what we always do in terms of here's the thing, the disaster. Here it's an epidemiological medical thing. And what is the Catholic response? So without further ado, or with a very brief break, 2 minutes, I'll be right back to you all. We're going to grab my coffee and we'll get started. Coffee is the most of them. It's the best. I gave up coffee for less than 1 year. Never again.
Yeah, I like my iced mocha. I like coffee and I like chocolate. So I have a mocha.
Yeah, it is.
And, pretty soon we're drinking a hot mocha because if it gets the weather changes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we want to give up coffee. And I don't drink much beer, but every once in a while, I like beer. It's great. I'm telling you, I have to give that.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I can get out and visit with my brother. We don't
Yeah.
cuss about the government and drink beer.
Reminisce and
Yeah.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So your son works for this system protection guy. Yeah, I just
I live in Washington, Colton area, rural Colton farm.
Yeah.
Druffel, you know the name Druffel? Last name Druffel. My last name is Druffel. I don't recognize that name. Druffel. Most people say, oh, you're Druffel. It's a common name. Police farmers.
That does kind of ring a bell. Well, I got a little bit of a farm background.
Yeah.
Maybe that's one of the reasons I went into engineering. I don't want to milk cows anymore.
Yeah, we never had cows. My husband did growing up, but
How many acres you farm?
well, I don't farm, it's leased out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Fair amount, smaller, probably considered a small farm. We're farming it ourselves.
Wow. Somebody told me, like down there, if you were milking cows as a cash crop, you can get by with 160 with a family. But that's irrigated. Up here, it's more like price. Price that. A lot of people do it.
Yeah, we do.
Okay, so cholera outbreak. I'm just getting right to it. I'm going to keep challenging myself to continue to cut the superfluous fluff and fat and just get right to the information. So I'm just diving right in. Point number one, I've got about 26 points for you today if you'd like to be keeping score, taking notes. That book with Kamiak Butte on it, so sweet, so legit, so boss. Point number one, there is a cholera epidemic that begins in Russia in 1847, lasts until 1851. First interesting point, it's exactly almost to the year 500 years after the Black Plague. There's a lot of connective threads in this class. Today, here's the chronological connective thread of this cholera outbreak in Russia happening 500 years after the Black Plague. The second connective thread is in the Catholic response. We're going to compare the response to cholera to the response to COVID, the recent COVID pandemic crisis, etc. As I always say, kind of my pro forma note, but I mean it from the bottom of my heart, and we should always be praying for the souls in purgatory. God rest all these people's souls. A lot of death, obviously, in wake of all these disasters, and especially these kind of, mass medical emergency events. It kills over 1 million people. In 1852, a year later, cholera spreads east to Indonesia, and works its way through many parts in East Asia, China and Japan. The Philippines become infected at the end of the decade, the 1850s. Getting close to 1860 now, an outbreak, 1859, 1860 in Bengal, in India, the subcontinent. Contributes to, like in our super spreader COVID thing, of people getting on planes and transmitting it, to travelers coming out of India and seeding this in Iran, Iraq, Russia, Saudi Arabia. In America, during the same time period, because once more, it's cholera 19th century in some, but we're kind of focusing on, or at least in the syllabus headline, I had the 1850s. In the 1850s, where is there a large cholera outbreak in America? Does anyone know? Centered around what city? Chicago. Yeah, very good. Very good. So there's some kind of basic stuff, right? Really quickly, what is cholera? It is a, germ-borne water disease, right? It's through contaminated water is the problem. Anyone know what the great breakthrough is in terms of this? And I'm not asking the question very, very well, but the cholera outbreak also in London, also known as, go ahead.
Some doctor that tracked it down to a brewery.
Wow. Okay. Great. Wow. I don't even have that information. That's awesome. That they were even able to locate like a ground zero kind of thing. This Dr. John Snow, exactly, in the Broad Street cholera outbreak in London in 1854, is able to confirm scientifically that germ contaminated water is the source of cholera, not this miasma, this kind of like larger, bad gases, the environment.
He actually tracked it down to the well, but the brewery was right near it, and he noticed that all the brewery workers did not suffer from cholera because all they drank was the beer, which had already been taken care of.
So the beer, oh, that's amazing. But so on that point, see, first of all, I love beer. I really actually consider myself a beer aficionado. I don't know if anyone needs me to say this, but I do not smoke marijuana, which has become really just a really socially acceptable thing now, right? I do not smoke marijuana. I don't smoke anything. I've never smoked a cigarette in my life. I think smoking a pipe is very cool, like very dignified, 100%. If I was going to smoke something, I'd probably do pipe tobacco, but I've never done that. I just have no desire to smoke. I don't like to drink anything except beer and wine, but I love beer and wine, and I really, really love beer. Like if there's no question, there's like you need to relax, classic thing, whatever. Like, do you want a whiskey? Do you want to smoke a pipe? Do you want to whatever? Like, no, I'll take a beer. And it's fun. It's funny to say about that, like, oh, beer, haha, look at these beers, guys were healthy. This literally was one of the strengths of monastery brewed beer in the Middle Ages, that because of the process of making the beer, the germs were taken out.
Right.
And so it actually was healthier than water.
Mhm.
Like, I love all of our very human reaction. And all of us in America have this puritanical anti-alcohol strain. All of us in America have this, ooh, alcohol, bad boy, how dare you, kind of the progressive movement, prohibition, like that's in our DNA. My grandmother, of happy memory, God bless her, was the most devout Catholic in the world, was also extraordinarily Calvinist in her disposition, like Puritan. She would have been fitted in awesome in Massachusetts Bay. Could have been like, wait, what? You're a Catholic? We still love you. You're fine. Like, she had a very kind of like that. All Americans have this puritanical pilgrim type attitude, and it spills over in that hilarious point there that you were making, laughing, oh, haha, the beer is healthy. But wait a second, that's true. Exactly. In the process of making beer, you kill the germs. And in the Middle Ages, as in this example you give now, beer was actually a healthier option for avoiding these waterborne illnesses, cholera being certainly one of the worst of them. Okay, so yeah, go ahead.
Cholera was only out of the water, it wasn't person to person?
I'm not sure what the person, do you know person-to-person transmission? I know water is the kind of incubation agent, the origin point. As always, great question. I will never give you false answers. I don't know, to make a long story short. Does anyone know what the transmission is person? Yeah, if a person has cholera, body fluids, or whatever. Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure cholera causes massive like dehydration, like diarrhea, everything. Like that's one of the biggest problems, that you become dehydrated from all the vomiting and diarrhea and whatever. And like, the violent effects. Yeah, sorry for, enjoy your food. You brought food to a discussion on cholera, it's your choice. You can do it, Brian Alexander, you can do whatever you want in my class. I give you crap because like I'm being the opposite. But you can do whatever you want. I really couldn't care. I will follow, there's this guy,
I was thinking with cholera.
Go ahead.
on the-
and I'll come back to my point. I'm gonna make my freaking
Is
point.
it? I thought it was like parasite or something, since the digestive disease, it would make sense that you have to ingest
Got it,
fecal matter.
got it.
I'm pretty sure. And that's why having bad water is key, is how it spreads. It's not, I'm around people with cholera and they're looking at me and they're close to me. It's drinking water, which somebody else's fecal matter got in.
Got it. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie.
I might be.
You might be wrong, but I defer to you wholly. It's a great answer. And I think like, if I was gonna go with anything, my lack of knowledge versus your wonderfully formulated, elegant response, however correct it is, it sounds good to me. That you'd have to come in direct contact with this thing somehow. Going back to your point, you guys can bring food to class, you guys can do whatever you want. There's a guy, Father Reginald Foster, he died recently, God rest his soul. He was a famous Latinist. And he's like, the only thing I don't want you to do in my class is mess up Latin. He's like, you can bring beer, you can show up with like in a bathing suit, whatever. I agree. Like, I don't care. You can do whatever you want in my class. Just be here and do the work, right? So I was saying about your food, not that I'm sorry if I'm ruining your appetite. However, you made the epic fail decision to eat in discussion in cholera. So there's gonna be gross stuff we're talking about. That's all I mean. But your answer, thank you. Seriously, yeah, that sounds good to me. Yeah. It has to be direct contact with this germ material. So germs in the water. Water is the dominant thing. John Snow, this genius guy, God bless him, who again discovers it's waterborne, it's germs, it's not miasma, makes this dot map illustrating the cluster of cases around the point of origin. It's kind of like, yeah, we see this in the COVID era, right? That here's where to avoid, here's where it came from. Some people say Snow's work, welcome Turner, you're coming at the perfect time, during the 1854 Broad Street cholera outbreak, his work during that is the kind of one of the founding events of the field of epidemiology. So Dr. Anthony Fauci might look up to John Snow as a personal hero. I went into infectious disease because of Snow. Am I just completely making that up right now? Like about Fauci? Of course, I have no idea. Like I could imagine, like if you're going to look up to a hero in disease transmission, you want to work for the CDC, Snow in this cholera outbreak would be one of these people. Now, okay, yes, but
I looked it up, it's fairly contaminated food and water.
So food and water as well. Okay. Wow. Yeah, that's not good. The formal definition one more time. Cholera is a waterborne bacterial disease that violently attacks a person's digestive system. The fatality rate is as high as 20%, which is awful. Remember, COVID, I think, got like what, I don't know if it was even 1%, something in that region, but it's 20 times more fatal. It's not bubonic plague level. We're talking about, 60, 70%, 20% is pretty bad. In a room of 500 people infected with cholera, 100 will die, and everyone else might barely make it, right? It's very, very, very devastating. A second point I don't want to miss, just moving off, talk about the facts, some of the earlier outbreaks, whatever. This also creates a revolution in what? Vis-a-vis cities, obviously. Sanitation systems, exactly. The idea of public waterworks, sanitation, public health. So John Snow, awesome for him on a very discovery basic level, just finding this, dot mapping it, being able to talk about where the outbreak is and understand the disease better. And it comes from germs, not miasma, not environment, but also, okay, founding father of epidemiology, or one of them certainly, and then improving waterworks the world over. And often these big breakthroughs happen in cities that are appropriate to that. If this discovery is made in Des Moines, Iowa, or somewhere on the frontier, it might be harder to disseminate through literature and whatever. This is in downtown London, already been, arguably the greatest city in the world in 1854. This is during Queen Victoria's time in power, Britain absolutely running the world. We're still obviously, 50 years away from the American century, and post-World War America rise to hegemon status. So the fact that it happens in the world capital aids the kind of scientific and sanitation progressions as well. public was generally gripped with a fear about the disease. So that's a kind of notes on COVID I had. And we're going to talk about that. How much does fear play into the role of, of this kind of thing? The Pope at this time, we're kind of already diving right into responses now. Actually, the rest of the class, that's it on the cholera epidemic. Stat-wise, mortality rate, what it does, solutions. What about just Catholic responses in general? I didn't find a lot from Pope Pius IX. However, with Pius IX, who his supporters very, very much like, he's Saint Pius IX, Syllabus of Errors. This bulwark against the Risorgimento, kind of secular, Masonic, young Italy, Garibaldi, blah, 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 unification of Italy, but while they take church property, seize the papal states. His supporters very much like him. His detractors hate him, of course, the classic thing, right? He's just
and the church is split in the middle and made him blessed.
He's still only blessed. He's not saying it. Oh, my bad then. Okay. Thank you for the correction. Really, I thought he was already saying.
I thought you were saying it's like, well, yeah, like people like Pius.
Right. No, but the church is not. He's not been formally canonized.
He's only blessed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pius X is Saint Pius X.
Yes.
But 9th is blessed. Okay, thank you. Well, nonetheless, listen to this, right? When he visited the soldiers of Garibaldi, the famous Garibaldi, Giuseppe Garibaldi, who Abraham Lincoln offered the possibility of running the Union Army during the Civil War, and Garibaldi said no. When he visited the soldiers of Garibaldi being held prisoners in Castle San Angelo, he was moved to tears with this remark: "Lo, my friends, here before you is, quote, the vampire of Italy, as your general calls me. Why have you taken up arms against me, a poor old man? And tell the old man tell him, Garibaldi, that the old man he calls the vampire of the Vatican has compassion for him and loves him, proved it today by celebrating Holy Mass for him." Pius IX was very, very personally charitable, despite the kind of grand, and I love that about the papacy. I love the grand nature of it. There's a reason why you might cry listening to a Adeste Fidelis in Notre Dame, because it's grand. When Christ comes, Christ who did not disdain the Virgin's womb, who was born in a stable in Bethlehem amongst animals, is going to return as like the most glorious king of all time, right? The most high majesty, not this, oh, everyone's equal, we're all equal kind of stuff. He's going to come with the highest glory. I love glory. Glory has a place, like beauty and glory and majesty. And Pius very much embodies that in his time on the papal throne, on the chair of St. Peter, 1846 to 78. But he's also very, very personally charitable. If you think, oh, I really like how Pope Francis, there's always those photos of him like washing the feet of a homeless man or whatever. Like Pius does all those things too. Those are not mutually exclusive. It's not like you can either be a quote Pope of the people or majestic, but you can't be both. Well, and so really quickly though, in his just brief quip, if you wonder like what does that have to do with cholera? Just talking about praying for Garibaldi as enemies. The church, as the spotless bride of Christ, in this long reflection I'm going to give you now. The rest of the class is all just Catholic response to cholera. Seeks spiritual remedies first, like that, like literally just tell Garibaldi, you guys are trying to kill me, but I'm praying for you. Prayer and devotions first. Remember last class, the mathematical principle no one liked, 1 equals ABC. Whatever we have, we're calling for personal repentance. We're calling for acts of piety, for repertory acts. So without further ado, just keep that in mind. Here is an article. Now we're backtracking. I said today's class is 1850 to 62. And this is our last lecture that's not 20th century, by the way. Remember, next Tuesday, we start Galveston Hurricane, 1900. So next class, we remain in the 20th and 21st century, the remainder of the class. Going a little bit back in time to the cholera epidemic of 1837. Why? Because I'm a historian, and historians use the sources they have. There was amazing sources on the cholera epidemic of 1837, much better from a Catholic perspective than the Broad Street epidemic that I briefly mentioned with John Snow in the beginning of epidemiology. So it is simply necessity is the mother of all invention. Here is a talk given by this Polish priest, Father Stanislaw Stawiński. His last name is Stawinski. Stanislaw Stawiński, Father Stanislaw Stawiński. And it's cool, he's talking about the cholera epidemic in 1837. All props, the next 10 pages, to Father Stanislav. It's like quoting from his research. Credit to him, not me. Me, punch me. Me, X, fail. Him, A. Him, high five. All credit to him. Him giving a speech about this cholera epidemic of 1837, which he delivered, this is super cool, ready for it, during COVID. So I said earlier, right, like the cholera epidemic that breaks out, Turner, before you came, we talked about in Russia, 1847 to 51 is 500 years to date after the Black Plague. I said in this class, there's a lot of connectivity of certain stuff. Here's our double connectivity. Maybe it's on a recurring cycle. Every century has this kind of epidemiological disasters and whatever. The great connection here is that the cholera epidemic, the reaction of the church and the people, let's compare and contrast to COVID. Brad, that's an awesome ringtone. That's legit, really. It's really cool.
Wait till the phone rings.
I'm so jealous. Like I'm questioning everything about my ringtone section in light of that right now. Yeah, really.
It's not offensive if it interrupts the class, right? That's a nice thing about it. Some of them are. Some ringtones are so.
It's like you speaking. It's so offensive and obnoxious. Exactly. Dude, you could not be more a legend, bro. You could not be. Seriously. But anyways, getting back to the material. I'm gonna honor you and how cool you are by doing what you always tell us to get back on track. Let's get back on track. I think that's the highest compliment I can pay you. Instead of sycophantically complimenting you, just getting back to the material. So you're always trying to get me to do that. So he's going to talk about this priest. Where is his name? Oh man, this completely fell off. What happened to this? Wow. Okay. Well, that was not where I wanted that to be. I have my pages numbered incorrectly. I want to give you this priest's name, who's one of these heroes here. Here it is. Okay, Father Vincent Pallotti. Okay. Father Vincent spelled like, I'm not going to spell Vincent for you. You're Americans. Pallotti, also straightforward. Ready? Pallotti, X25. Pallotti. Father Vincent Pallotti. He's one of the stars of this investigation once more by this Polish priest, Father Stanislav Stavinsky, giving this talk about the 1837 cholera pandemic during the COVID crisis. So the 1830s, especially years between 1835 and 1837, were years of great suffering for Europe because of the cholera epidemic, which was then known as, quote, the Asian epidemic, because it had originally come from India. What does that sound like? Remember, compare and contrast. The China flu or something, whatever the people are saying, right? And oh, that's so racist and offensive. Okay, maybe it is. Or dog, I'm just naming where it comes from. I'm never gonna tell you how to feel about like calling COVID the China flu. It's so offensive. It's not offensive. It's up to you. You tell me if it's offensive or not. People were calling it that.
I bet the European intellectuals in the 1830s sat around the room and thought, what are we gonna call this thing?
To not offend people.
Right.
What are we gonna call this thing to offend as many people as possible, especially
Right.
people who don't even live in this part of the world.
Yeah, but
They're never gonna hear about the fact that.
well, they might see it trending on Twitter. They might see it on Twitter later.
That's always the funniest thing to me. It's like there's this notion that like people in Europe, in America are just like out to conspire and beat down minorities. And say, guys, this is a situation where they're not even there. It's like if you're in Italy, there will be a few people from China probably come by the ports from China. Otherwise,
It's a much more closed, larger world than you're right.
It's a more interconnected world in the sense that you don't have like people. And if we're going to talk about like modern multiculturalism, it is more interconnected. Like in Italy, you have people who are from all sorts of different cultures. You've got Albanians and Greeks and all sorts of people who were in Italy at the time. But this notion that like, I'm sorry, I just have like, I take off these frustrations among friends just because all the crap I have to see here.
You're amongst friends. Vent away. Go ahead, Brad.
You're talking about this cholera going from one place to the other, from Europe to.
It's a worldwide event.
Yeah.
How did that? Through ports, mainly through ports. The exact same way with the Black Plague, through trade routes.
India,
Yeah.
it was huge trade.
Well, it might maybe
Food.
Here's a hypothesis. Yeah, food or spices.
Food, and then from people relieving themselves into the bad sanitation, into the water, to the sewage, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
The runoff, whatever.
Like you don't wash your hands and you handle
there you
the disease.
Yeah.
It just spreads around, you get back, people are kind of sick and It didn't.
So anyways, exactly. Well, he's saying here, you gotta remember, this is all for last time. Father Stanislav Stavinsky. The spread of the disease was quick. In Italy, the first epidemic deaths occurred in September of 1835. Right away, the Pope then, Gregory XVI, orders preventative measures in terms of devotion. Remember the earlier point of Pius? The exposition of the most distinguished Christian relics for the common veneration in the churches where they were present. Some of them are the skulls of the apostles Peter and Paul in the Lateran Basilica, the holy face of Veronica, the finger of St. Peter in Vatican Basilica, the wood of the cross, the thorn in the crown of the Basilica of the Holy Cross in Jerusalem. He also orders a celebration of extraordinary novena to be held from August 6th to 15th. I don't have to tell anyone, I think, what August 15th is. Of course, it's the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary. August 6th is the Feast of the Transfiguration. In that same year, 1835, the Cardinal Vicar Odescali publishes a decree called L'Invito Sacro, the Holy Call, which is affixed to all the doors. Which is also awesome to affix something good to doors after Luther and Wittenberg Cathedral. He affixes this L'Invito Sacro, and this document, the Father Stanislav says very, interestingly, making this connection. This document does not have much in common with the decrees issued by Cardinal D'Angelo Donatatis on March 8th, 12th, and 13th, 2020. The decree signed by Cardinal Odescali reveals the 19th century mentality regarding the epidemic. So he says right away, and I really bumbly explained that. I was like, blah, 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 blah. Let me try to explain it more clearly. 1835, this cardinal affixes something to a cathedral door. It's a note about the pandemic. The Father Stanislav, the author of this article, the investigator here, says it's not like the COVID stuff we saw in our churches in 2020. You tell me what you think. And why is it different? Here's me reading from L'Invito Sacro, 1835. Quote, a fatal disease, which for the obscurity of its origin, for the extravagance of its progress, for the uncertainty of its attacks, appears for the believers to have the features and signs of a scourge. That's A, maybe God is punishing people, right? Remember 1 equals ABC. Will Rome be immune from it, dispensed from it? Oh, Romans, do not delude yourselves. Yes, Rome has failed its duty. The holy name of God is trampled on. Feasts and solemnities are desecrated, and with what an insolence. The vice roams the streets of this holy city. So if Rome has failed its duty, it must again be scourged. Oh, unhappy Rome, only with Mary covering the city with her mantle. The arm of the angel of end times that is waiting to empty the poisonous cup on the poor guilty children can be held back. So let us all turn to Mary. What are your thoughts on all that? Is that the same, different? How do we react to COVID? We got stuff like that on church doors. Father Stanislav says not at all. What similar difference? What are your thoughts? This by the way, we can end the class here. We're not going to. Obviously, I have a lot of information for you. I appreciate so much how deep we go in our maple syrup history of we're going to go through all the pages. What I mean is this is an unbelievable Catholic response to a disaster, right on the nose, and compared to COVID, which you all went through. So let's break this apart. What I just read to you.
I think the church actually officially said this is God punishing us. Yeah, right?
No, he's theologically speculating, right? Perhaps, right?
I think he kind of says it's like the sense of the faithful, the census fide, which I might add Lumen Gentium, I think is quite strong on, was that it is a scourge. And so therefore, if it is a scourge, is the city of Rome in a position where it's not deserving of scourges? Absolutely not. You're drinking too much. You're probably dancing, which is even worse. And you're doing it on feast days, which is like this triple. So
Okay.
better stop.
Okay.
But that is completely unlike, even the best responses from bishops in COVID would not say something like, this is a reminder. I think some of them did. It was like, this is a reminder, you need to just stop sinning. Generally speaking, people need to stop sinning because bad things happen. I don't know, I'm trying. I don't really
No, you're right. The wages of sin is death. That kind of thing, right?
Right.
Before you set life and death, oh man, choose wisely. Okay.
Right. And that's emphasized there versus what I don't think any of our bishops or cardinals said. this is the time to re-examine your moral life and decide, okay, well, maybe I should stop fornicating, overeating, thinking about others uncharitably, lying.
Right. Exactly. That's my earlier point. But about the formula, not on the board, but in last class, 1 equals ABC. Whatever you fall on A and B, it's definitely a scourge, or I don't know if it's a scourge, it's God's providence. Exactly. That call to personal introspection, reflection. How is God using this perhaps to bring about my own personal sanctification and that of those people around me? Now, the Cardinal Vicar, Adeshali, had concrete proposals, Father Stanislav tells us. On the positive side, the announcement of this extraordinary novena on the occasion of the Feast of the Assumption of our Blessed Mother. The negative side, things we're going to like just, we're going to do, we're going to restrict. All of you might be familiar with this, that many public gatherings were forbidden. Specifically during the period of the novena, taverns, places selling alcohol, and most other places of entertainment were closed. The one exemption is coffee shops. I'm dead serious. Coffee shops remain open. Wow. So you're telling me Cardinal Adeshelli, Italian, he likes coffee, the sky is blue, wow.
He left he closed the places that sold alcohol and left the churches open. Huh, it's interesting.
Seems to be opposite of what we went through. Right, surely. Pope Gregory the 16th does a procession with the icon of Madonna Salus Populi Romani, salvation of the Roman people, protector of the Roman people. So the response to this, especially in light of COVID, is on our knees, acts of reparation, prayer, beseeching heaven for help. We can clearly say, sarcastically or not, with derision or not, because we're angry about how COVID went or not, but that it is just it's the opposite. It's the photographic negative. It's turning to God, seeing in all things God's hand, and Romans tells us, chapter 8, God makes all things work for the good of those who love him, focusing on that. I'm going to fix my life. Where am I guilty? Even in this thing that has nothing to do with guilt, it's an epidemic, fine. But in this valley of tears, God uses those things to bring about our repentance. The only unhappiness in the world is not to be among the saints. The only tragedy is to lose salvation, right? What profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? That's the response here. Our COVID response is the opposite, right? Just get super, super stoned and just drink tons of alcohol and watch tons of Netflix. You don't need church. It's not essential. It's the complete opposite response. Despite all this stuff, by July of 1837, the fear of the epidemic is going nuts. People are really, really, really getting afraid. And so Father Stanislav singles out this awesome priest, Father Vincent Pallotti, who is so based and so bossed because he starts off with prayer first. He indeed responds to Matthew Kelly, who said very well, Matthew Kelly, the Catholic self-help author, rediscovering Catholicism, the biggest lie in the history of Christianity. I heard God laugh. You might have, seen Matthew Kelly books at the back of the church sometime. Again, anyways, it's not a class about Matthew Kelly, but nonetheless, Matthew Kelly in one of his books very well puts it. Good job. Wholeheartedly agree that one of the biggest problems with modern society is action without prayer. It's just doing it. Oh, I don't need God to love my neighbor. I don't need God to be a good person. No, prayer first, then action. Father Vincent Pallotti, first thing he does is begin a triduum of prayers with a particular intention. He's working in with a particular intention, seeking favors for the people of Naples. This port city, Brad, to answer your question in terms of spread and all that, this port city where the epidemic by that time had made its way into the Italian peninsula. Pallotti's doing the most basic, literal, pun intended, daily bread prayers of blessing the food eaten by infected people so they can be protected, prayer first. And he goes about setting out doing a lot of work as well. He's doing personal penance, but he's also going out and doing a lot of work. And he's also, on a kind of tertiary level, very psychologically attuned. He says this, in spite of the efforts, situation in Rome was not good. It is said that fear is the mother of all excesses. There had been this one teacher who was killed by a crowd because he was believed to be a super spreader. That's the unclean one, get her kind of thing, right? And so Pallotti, in addition to praying and going out and ministering to the poor, is also trying to keep people calmed down, trying to reinforce the charges, so to speak, trying to inspire his fellow brethren and the laity to, yes, put trust in God, do not give in to fear. And we're going to talk about that in a second, maybe 10 minutes. I'll harken back to, keep that in the back of your mind. Father Vincent Pallotti, who is the rector of the Church of the Holy Spirit of the Neapolitans, founded the Union of the Catholic Apostolate, a college for the foreign missions. He was, again, very much involved in the devotional life of his parish, celebrating the first Epiphany octave, the Marian month of May for the clergy and the faithful. During the cholera epidemic, this man, who by the grace of God, storing up perhaps God's graces and treasures within him, is truly a hero in his on-the-ground work, but also the kind of psychological calming. And this leads people to say that his work during the cholera epidemic at its height in 1837 is, quote, an apostolate of charity. Okay. During the cholera epidemic, Father Stanislav says, like Father Pallotti, remember, Father Stanislav is the priest now writing about Father Pallotti in 1837, that, quote, compare this to the Black Plague, compare this to COVID, quote, the action of the clergy in general was exemplary. Pope Gregory XVI, who himself was old, made personal visits to hospitals, thus setting an example for the clergy. Father Vincent Pallotti, members of the Union, emerged in a special way to assist the needy in every part of the city. Pallotti requested ministerial faculties for the forgiveness of reserved sins for his collaborators, and he asked them in order to, quote, satisfy the multitude of penitents who in the current circumstances approach the Holy Tribunal of Penance in the Church of the Holy Spirit of the Neapolitans. Father Vincent Pallotti was also fully committed, among many things, to assisting the sick and helping their families, and also spending many hours in the confessional. Sister Maria Columba testified in this regard, quote, several times I have seen him, Pallotti, in surplice and stole, following the hearse that carried the dead. This at a time when people were like, just stay away from the dead. They're going to contaminate, like Black Plague style, just dump them in a ditch. No. I'm a priest first. I am a man of God. I've sworn a holy oath to take care of the flock, to not be dispersed when the wolves come, right? Shortly after the end of the pandemic, Pallotti wrote to Mr. Cassini Tommaso, apologizing he's not able to visit a certain prisoner. Cassini Tommaso asked Pallotti to visit the prisoner in Castel Sant'Angelo. Pallotti could not visit the prisoner because of the other works necessitated by the epidemic. And when I last went, well, the person was no longer there. Pallotti writes, quote, in the time of cholera, the Pious Society placed a small box. This Pious Society that he was a member of placed a small box at the entrance of the sacristy of the Church of the Holy Spirit of the Neapolitans, and it was accessible to all the poor. It was enough that the person wrote in a small piece of paper the name, surname, place of residence, name of parish, and person's need, and placed it in the box. Then, 2 by 2, the priests went to the place of the poor and cared for their needs. Freaking awesome. Awesome. Not a box just to dump coins in, a request box. Signed, Barb, Moscow, Idaho. I need new bed sheets and Gatorade. Well, whatever, right? And priests would show up. We received your note, like your email, your text, your flock note, to minister to you at a time when, again, if you were infected, just quarantine them, let them die, Maybe, again, a complete opposite response to COVID. We're going to finish this class talking about Catholics and COVID. Well, I don't know. The members of the union sought to help according to the need of the place or person. Some helped with clothing, others with coupons for bread and meat. Some helped bring lemons to cholera patients, since lemons were then considered to be the most suitable medicine for cholera. Pallotti had noted this, quote, the priests of the Pious Society night and day went to the assistance of the cholera patients. The distribution of coupons for bread and meat has been a practice since the beginning of the union in 1835 and continues even to this day. Pandemic is finally contained in October of 1837. Blessed Anna Marie Taiga, T-A-I-G-A, very famous mystic, who's already then very, very popular. This Father Felice Randamini writes, quote, in Rome yesterday died in secret a great servant of God who has been showered with many extraordinary gifts. Just in spite of her already then kind of like known sanctity by the grace of God and popularity, she too kind of dies anonymously. People are dying anonymously throughout the city. And if people like Father Pallotti, who are ministering through this box, help when they're alive and giving them the last rites and praying for these extraordinary graces that have, like, from what I understand, I don't want to misspeak here, but like receive the office of like an extraordinary forgiveness, often only reserved for the Pope can give. Those kind of apostolic blessing and confessions, and it's amazing. A true kind of heroic figure. I found more on Pilati related to cholera than even any of the priests that were kind of just in general named the Black Plague. Here's a specific example. Father Vincent Pilati, please pray for us if you are already, amongst the saints. God is God. I can't judge. I don't know. This guy seems like he'd go immediately to heaven, no purgatory, a high place. Seems like he is very, very Christ-like. Very kind of brave, awesome priest. Yeah.
You said lemons. When did they start trying that?
I have no idea when. It just says that it was considered to be, I mean, everything back then is natural remedies, right? No one is getting Benadryl or Excedrin. There's no pharmacies, but it's like, it was just considered like from the citrus or like.
When did they discover the citrus stuff was
No idea.
to prevent scurvy?
No idea. I was going to say about scurvy next. Yeah, I have no idea.
Well, they're giving lime juice to British sailors like in the 1700s.
Oh, were they?
Really?
Probably, I would think really the Spaniards probably did that too, because they had long sea voyages and.
How does what is scurvy? All I know is that it affects sailors. Why does citrus prevent it?
Because,
Vitamin C deficiency.
yeah,
So to prevent scurvy, you need to find a source of vitamin C.
What is scurvy? What is that?
It's
your bones deform.
Like osteoporosis in a certain way?
Yeah.
your skin starts to lose. I think
Yeah.
it does something to your
It
skin.
just debilitates you.
Yeah.
And
It's-
it makes your
it's a bad-
bones bow,
It's a bad deal, right?
rickets and.
Which,
Got it.
yeah, so like even a modern like military survival guy, so like let's say you're deployed in like kind of the Russian tundra or something, you need to know which plants have vitamin C. Because you aren't gonna live just foraging rabbits and foxes or whatever the heck you can shoot. You're gonna have to get something that has vitamin C in it.
Right.
Right.
So that's what the fruit's good for you. And they have citrus. Citrus is not a new world fruit, so they use citrus in Italy for 2,500 to 3,000 years. I think so. I think it's pretty good. I always feel good when I have citrus and I'm sick. I think it's pretty standard.
Citrus is awesome. Yeah, exactly. Whatever the kind of like the science fully, it's like, yeah, when I have a cold, I eat a bunch of oranges and it helps, I think. And if it's placebo effect, well, that also helps. It's good to have psychological placebos, right? Placebo effect is an effect for a reason because you actually are putting in mind over matters. It's also good. It's all positive. Anyways, Pilates' father, his own father dies. And he says beautifully, he dispatches 3 letters asking for suffrages in favor of his father, quote, to whom I owe so much. Not to get too far up on a rabbit hole. Maybe this guy is so awesome. He had a good upbringing. It's a very kind of simple, a note that has nothing to do with this class whatsoever, but just very human stuff. Maybe the ultimate privilege is to come from a good family, have a good father and mother who you see as representatives of God, rather than someone you want to rebel against, and then become an anarchist, whatever, kind of thing. So maybe his kind of paternal devotion as a priest, as all priests literally are, father, comes from his own father who, was very beloved. All right. Then he talks about the rest of the thing. Pilates is attributed to some kind of prophecy during this time. With prophecy, always like 100%, I say whatever the church says. I cannot stand that people are like, oh, I know the secret prophecy. It's like, stop, right? Like, you stop that. But then secondly, like, are prophecies real? Yeah. Today is the penultimate apparition of Our Lady of Fatima. The miracle of the sun is October 13th. These things are real. The problem is, it's very tread lightly. So I'm treading lightly. I'm not saying Pilati also had this secret line to God. I don't know about that. It's just this priest is saying here. Remember this is the callback. Remember the hook back when I was saying that he was very calming. This one priest was flipping out, Father Felice Randanini, and Pilati just keeps writing to him about the fear of your death. I tell you, I wait for you in Rome. Be calm. Cholera will not find you. And it doesn't. It says Ranandini is flipping out because, quote, he's more accustomed to diplomatic language than prophetic language. But Pilati, just tells him with certainty, stop it, dude, you're cool, it's good. And it turns out true. And so afterwards, the guy's like begging for forgiveness I don't know why he's begging for forgiveness. Maybe this guy's just total drama king, He's always just drama. He's also a reality TV star. That's before he became a priest. That's what it was. So there you go. Active on social media. Now I understand. But he's like, why? fear is normal. Fear is, why is he apologizing? But he is. He's freaking out and I'm so sorry that I didn't trust. Randini says beautifully, or excuse me, Pilati, our hero, Pilati says beautifully, who earlier had said to a different person about this vision he had, it was not God's intention you should always have the thought of death on your mind, so that you lived every day as the day of your death. I humbly ask you to promise me not to spend any day without having at least for a few moments meditated on the great principle of death, right? Memento mori, like think about your death, you will not sin. Think of the 4 last things you are made in a state of grace. So Pliny writes to Renandini, quote, always in every situation you must live and should be able to say with that spirit and with that firm belief with which the Apostle Paul said, whether we live or whether we die, we belong to the Lord. Pray that the Lord grants me the same grace even though I am not worthy of it. Pliny, this guy's an absolute legend. That's exactly the approach Catholics should have in the face of any disaster. I'm going to mangle the other Pauline phrase, like, to live is great, to die is gain, to go to Christ. St. Paul often saying in his writings, whether we live or die, we belong to the Lord. That spirit of like, and no matter what, it's good. If I'm in a state of grace and alive, life is beautiful. It's awesome. Life is great. But to die is even better for the believing Christian, because I'll go to heaven. It's like, that's the attitude Pilates started to encourage his charges with psychological communism. Oh, and the last point he makes here is that this is awesome. What is the beginning of all wisdom? Old Testament. What is the beginning of all wisdom is what? Fear of the Lord. Exactly. And the contrast here that fear is not fear of the Lord. Fear is being a scaredy cat. And I'm using that like cheesy 1987 saying, intentionally. Like just being afraid. Being afraid is not good. Right? John Paul II pointed out that Christ says often, maybe more than anything in the New Testament, be not afraid. Being afraid, freaking out, panicking is bad. We all having different anxieties. Do you think I'm not scared of stuff all the time? I'm already hypocritical enough. I'm not trying to add to my hypocrisy. Well, I'm so brave. Yeah, right. I'm the worst. We're all scared of certain things, but he's saying that's bad. Fear of the Lord is the only thing I fear is to be separated from God. I fear letting God down. God has given us 10 commandments. It doesn't matter what I think. I'm afraid to disobey the Heavenly Father. It's too bad that Heavenly Father, that explanation so associated with LDS and Mormons. But it's like, but yeah, right? The Father in heaven, God the Father, first person of the Holy Trinity. I fear him the way I fear my own father, who is my personal hero, that kind of attitude. So Pilati embodies all these things very well. He's the ultimate response probably to the cholera epidemic in his bravery. The last thing, end of Father Stanislav Stavitsky. Here's a final thing I want to tell you really quickly. I'm going to spend 2 minutes on this and I'll open the class for questions. We're done. The human rights to safe drinking water and sanitation, Cardinal Peter Kodvo Apia Turkson, the Cardinal Turkson, now Vatican City, delivered from Geneva, September 14, 2017. So tomorrow, 6 years ago, talking about water and sanitation being a human right. So really quickly, introduction. This is about the global will to formalize and strengthen access to water and sanitation as a human right. These questions are not marginal, but basic and pressing. Basic, because where there is water, there is life. Pressing, because our common home needs to be protected. He goes in a quote, of course, Pope Francis Laudato Si, and talking about how for the church, this is also true, that every person deserves to have access to common goods. When people are not free to drink the most basic natural element that allows them to survive, i.e. water, this is because there is a patent social injustice. Therefore, the lack of access to water not only affects the dignity of those who cannot drink or use it, but also affects the common good. We can see how inequality in access to water generates other social inequalities. For this reason, in following St. John Paul II, Pope Francis reinforced that, quote, the principle of subordination of private property to the universal destination of goods, and thus the right of everyone to their use, is a golden rule of social conduct, and, quote, further quote, the first principle of the whole ethical and social order. So, not to make this too like, oh, the reason there's water shortages is all these big bad capitalists and whatever. You don't have to just take that, but sometimes maybe that is the answer sometimes, right? Maybe that is the answer sometimes. But not to make it a one-size-fits-all, and to make it, as always, in our disgusting society, left versus right, capitalist versus communist all the time. Whether you're left or right or whatever, yeah, like it is true. Like we have a common home. Climate change is the biggest threat. Climate change is a hoax. However you feel about that, we do have a common home. Like people should have clean drinking water. Water shouldn't be held by some kind of evil dictator somewhere shutting down a dam, and people are dying from thirst. That's obvious. And I'd say the connection is 2017 Cardinal Turkson letter to just going back now to John Snow, bringing it full circle to cholera in London, is the idea of like public sanitation should be something that the city prioritizes. Duh. No one wants to live in a filthy city. If you think about some cities in America that will remain nameless, that have maybe fallen into like deep disrepair, it's a tragedy. It's a common good tragedy because we shouldn't have a city that's completely degarbled.
Speaking of color,
Go
when is
ahead.
that gonna start? Yeah.
Well, I mean, right? I mean, like, truly, may God forbid it, but it's like, if pick your favorite or least favorite city, but exemplar are of a city that's fallen into disrepair. How can there not soon be awful things that spring up? And if it's like people are living in complete filth all the time, that's not good. It's not good for anyone. All those beautiful brothers and sisters, homeless people who are all made in the image likeness of God. That's not good. There's all a bunch of people under a bridge. It's not good for them. It's not good for other people. It's not good for the whole. It sucks for everyone. And so there's a point here of like public sanitation and all is a thing that begs a final question. How many disasters are preventable ones? We're going to talk about ultimate preventable disasters like Chernobyl. It's definitely a preventable disaster. It's bad engineering, bad design in the RBMK nuclear reactors, graphite tips that accelerate radioactivity instead of when you press the AZ5 button to shut it down, decelerate it. That's a human error. Is cholera a human error? I mean, if you have better sanitation, like you're saying, when do these diseases come back? Because people are being like, we don't need, cleanliness is overrated, whatever kind of terrible attitudes. No. Okay, who has final thoughts?
Well, the city of Moscow sent a report to homeowners.
Yeah,
about
right.
the
Of
water.
water.
You could go do one mess around. Fool with that kind of thing.
Yes. it is.
That sounds like a country song. I've been fooling with that quite a bit. I've been fooling, like, whatever. I don't know, whatever it is, but
Well, and it's been years since we took trouble.
well, no, just imagine like I'm trying to. How does the song go? Here, yeah, like the guy about a country guy trying to learn skills, right? My daddy didn't raise me in the country. I didn't learn much about cars or stuff like that, but I've been fooling with that quite a bit. Like it's not gonna be like he's fooling around learning how to be more better with his hands. I don't know. Be more better. That's excellent English right there. That's perfect English for a country song. And at the end of it all, we all gonna be more better. See, that's really good. Who has a serious point? I'm gonna keep singing. I will keep singing. No one wants to hear more of me singing. Who has a
I
better?
think that it's like, is the cholera epidemic physically preventable? Yeah, because of the sense that you have a better water system,
Right.
food, you have food, hygiene as being, whether law or common practice, being something which people do, and it's an expectation. It's like today, you can look at India, and they have terrible water quality in India, because they have cultural attitudes about how they treat their rivers.
Oh, the Ganges River, which in Indian culture is sacred. I mean, you literally have corpses in the river and stuff. I mean, yeah,
Exactly.
so what does that do for water quality? All right, yeah.
And there's things like, yeah, it's like when talking about like access to water as a human right, it's like, is the focus, should that be at European countries and American countries, which are
Right.
generally pretty good about that? I think even like in South America and Central America, generally water quality is not the worst. Certainly
Very
historically
good.
speaking. But at the same time, it's also why the Romans were so advanced and so revered by so much, or
Well, I mean,
because
Yeah,
they
totally.
had set up incredibly impressive aqua infrastructures. They had indoor plumbing. They knew that they needed to get water from the best source and not just the local source, which is why they set up their aqueducts to go, I don't know how many miles for each one, just to get clean water from point A to point B.
There's an old saying, instead of telling somebody that you're full of, wet, say you're full of canal water. If you've ever lived on a canal, those things are nasty.
Yeah, they are.
Kids swimming in them.
Wait, you can't swim in canals? Oh, I gotta reevaluate my life
Kids do
choices.
that too.
My grandpa had a house on Texas Canal, and we were all, it was like never go in the canal, never ever, because you don't know what's in there. If you get cut, you will get you can get a pretty bad disease.
Truly, God forbid.
Oh, well, yeah.
Hey, well, right? Hunting, fishing, and swimming in canals. I've been fooling with that little bit. It works really, isn't that good? It's really good. That is like not far from being a hit, for real.
But
All right.
The thing is about like the water infrastructure is it's not you can't attribute that to human fault, you can only attribute that to ignorance about how the way the world is. So it's a different sort of thing, something like Chernobyl, which is completely preventable because even just by Michael Crichton standards, maybe you shouldn't have been messing around with that now.
Yeah, surely. Yeah, the Jurassic Park thing. Like, be careful what you wish for, Pandora's box. All right, guys, listen. Enough of this. Enough. What is this? Enough of this awesome discussion. I mean this sincerely. You know my appetite for joking is as endless, but I so appreciate all of you. You're so smart. Gosh, I really love hearing your takes. As I always kind of say, I would do this to the camera, and I have. We had a class a couple weeks ago on Labor Day where it was just me by the room by myself. I had a good time, just me. It was great. But it's like I really appreciate all of you very, very much. Tonight there's an AMA, which means I hate acronyms so much. You know, tonight there is an Ask Me Anything. With me and Father Chase. I believe it's here. Someone is catering, like Moscow Bagel or something.
I think it's mostly just for students.
If you think it's mainly for students, well, with that policy, you can fool with just a little bit and come. I don't know, maybe it's just for students. So if you're a student, come, whatever. You know, Brad, if you can't be there, you know, I'm like livid about that. I'm angry inside about that. Thank you all to everyone watching online. Next week, we're in the 20th century. Next week will be like, we're getting to like really big stuff. Like cholera, one more time, God rest all their souls, awful, but not very famous. I guarantee I go on the street, I ask people cholera epidemic, or 1850, no one has any idea. But next week already, like Galveston hurricane, also kind of below the radar, but not San Francisco earthquake, 1906, massively famous. 1912, Titanic, maybe the disaster in American history. So we're getting to like stuff like that, Titanic, Hindenburg, atomic bombs. So the 20th century, you're gonna really pick up with a lot of like hype. So until then, God bless you all. See you. Have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.